Fridolin comes home. It is very late or very early, the specific, undefined hour between the end of one day and the beginning of the next, when the distinction between night and morning stops mattering. Albertine is asleep when he arrives. He sits on the edge of the bed and watches her for a while before he wakes her. He has decided, somewhere on the carriage ride home, that he is going to tell her everything. Not a version of it, not the parts that are easiest to say. Everything. She wakes before he has to wake her, and before he can speak, she tells him she has had a dream. It was vivid, she says, more vivid than dreams usually are. She was with the Danish officer, the one from the summer, the one she confessed to wanting with a completeness that frightened them both 2 nights ago. In the dream, she was with him completely, joyfully, without guilt or hesitation. And somewhere in the background of the same dream, Fridolin was being crucified, and she watched it happen, and she laughed. She tells him this without flinching. She does not soften it. She does not apologize for what the dream revealed about the parts of herself she does not get to choose. He listens, and then he tells her his night, all of it, the cafe, Noctegal, the password written on his wrist, the costume shop and Gibbezer's daughter, the carriage, the gate, the room full of masked figures performing something he never learned the rules of, the voice that told him to remove his mask, the woman who stepped forward and offered herself in his place, the death notice, the morgue, the body he could not identify with any certainty. He tells her everything. 2 confessions made on 2 consecutive nights in the same bed by 2 people who are discovering, together, for the first time in however many years they have been married, that they have each been carrying an entire second life that the other did not know existed. Neither of them speaks for a long time after he finishes. This is the moment Schnitzler spends the entire novella building toward, and he refuses, even now, to resolve it cleanly. He does not tell us whether Albertine is angry, or frightened, or relieved, or some combination that does not reduce easily into a single emotion. He does not tell us whether Fridolin feels forgiven, or judged, or simply exhausted in the particular way that comes after carrying something heavy for longer than you meant to. He tells us only that they lie there, side by side, in the dark. 2 people who have just told each other the truth about their own capacity for desire, betrayal, and fear, and who are now faced with the much harder question of what to do with that truth now that it exists between them and cannot be unsaid. This is the question the entire series has been walking toward since the opening line of part 1. Not what happened. What do you do now that you know? Albertine speaks first. She says, and this is close to Schnitzler's own words, preserved across every translation, because no translator has found a way to make them say anything else, that they should be grateful. Grateful that they have come through everything that happened to them over these 2 nights, whether it was real or only dreamed, safe and sound. She says they must not lose themselves in dreams of the past or anxieties about the future. She says they must live in the present, together, with what they now know about each other and about the world that exists alongside the one they thought they lived in. Fridolin asks her, quietly, what they should do now. And this is where the novella ends, not with an answer, with a sentence that has been translated many ways, but that always means the same thing. He says, slowly, no dream is entirely a dream. What he means is this: the gathering was real, the woman was real. Whatever happened to her, whether she lived or died, whether the body in the morgue was hers or some other woman's entirely, was real. None of it can be filed away into the comfortable category of something that did not actually happen, simply because it would be easier to live as though it hadn't. And also, he is still here. Albertine is still here. The dream, if that is even the right word for what happened to both of them across these 2 nights, did not consume them. They came back to their apartment, to their daughter, to their ordinary life, carrying the knowledge of what runs alongside it. That is where Schnitzler leaves us. In 1926, in a Vienna apartment, in the dark, with 2 people deciding to keep living inside a world they now understand more completely and trust slightly less. We are going to leave you in a similar place, but first, we owe you an accounting of where the real version of this story stands. Not where it ended, because it has not ended, but where it is, right now, as you are listening to this. Here is the accounting. Jeffrey Epstein died in a Manhattan jail cell in August of 2019 before any trial could test the federal charges against him. The official ruling is suicide. He was never convicted of anything in connection with the trafficking network that 30-plus victims had already described to investigators more than a decade earlier. Ghislaine Maxwell was convicted in December of 2021 on 5 federal counts, including sex trafficking of a minor. She was sentenced to 20 years. She remains incarcerated. Her appeal to the United States Supreme Court is still pending as of this recording. Alexander Acosta resigned as United States Secretary of Labor in 2019. The Department of Justice's own internal review found that he exercised poor judgment in 2007. It did not find misconduct. He faced no criminal charges. He testified before the House Oversight Committee in September of 2025, more than 18 years after the agreement he negotiated was signed. No co-conspirators. The people that 2007 immunity clause was written to protect have been criminally charged in connection with this case. Not one. The FBI agents who received a tip about Epstein in the mid-1990s, nearly a decade before his first arrest, have never been publicly identified. 2 prison guards were charged with falsifying records related to the night Epstein died. They received deferred prosecution agreements. Effectively, no conviction. As of this recording, the Department of Justice has released, or committed to releasing, 3.5 million pages of responsive documents. Major portions remain redacted. Significant sections of the flight logs, significant sections of the contact book. Whatever remains unreadable on that blackboard photographed inside the library on Little Street, James. The words beneath the ones we could read to you in Part 3. Power, truth, deception, music, intellectual, political, and others still blacked out. The House Oversight Committee has continued its own parallel investigation. The Senate Judiciary Committee held hearings with FBI Director Kash Patel that grew openly contentious. Attorney General Pam Bondi declined to answer certain questions put to her directly during her own testimony. Former Attorneys General Eric Holder and Merrick Garland, along with former FBI Director James Comey, have each stated publicly that they had no knowledge relevant to the House's ongoing investigation. This is the picture, in full, as it currently stands. Accountability for one person, partial disclosure of the documents, no accountability for anyone above that one person in the network the documents describe. Some of the accounting has been financial rather than criminal. Epstein's estate settled with the government of the United States Virgin Islands for more than $105 million. Little St. James, the island, the dock, the surveillance system, the library with its blackboard, the room with the dental chair and the masks of old men's faces mounted on the walls around it, was sold in 2023 for $60 million. Many victims have received compensation through the Epstein Victims Compensation Program, funded by the estate. Money has moved. Settlements have been reached. In the specific narrow sense that civil law provides, some accounts have been closed. But money is not the same thing as an answer. The families who lost years of their lives to this, the women who were trafficked as children and are now adults living with what happened to them, have received compensation in some cases. They have not received the names of everyone who is in the room. We have spent 5 episodes asking you to hold 2 stories in your mind at the same time. A Viennese doctor who walked into a gathering he had no right to attend and discovered that the respectable world he lived in had always had another one running alongside it. And a financier from Brooklyn who built, over 30 years, exactly the kind of room Schnitzler described, with its own island, its own cameras, its own rules, its own system of mutual knowledge that bound everyone who entered it to everyone else who had entered it before them. We have shown you the tomb at Yale, where 15 students a year still confess their deepest secrets to a society that keeps them forever. We have shown you the forest in California, where the most powerful men in the country still gather every July beneath a 40-foot owl, burning an effigy of their own accountability. We have shown you a hotel ballroom in the Netherlands in 1954, and every meeting since, where the rule has always been the same. What is said in the room stays in the room. None of this is hidden anymore. Not really. The documents are public. The court records are public. The flight logs are searchable. The footage of the owl ceremony is on the internet. The only thing that was ever truly hidden was the fact that you did not need permission to look. We are not going to tell you what to do with this. That would be a different kind of dishonesty than the one this series has spent 5 parts examining. The dishonesty of pretending we know something we do not. That there is a clean and satisfying resolution waiting at the end of this, if you just keep watching long enough. There is no clean resolution. Alexander Kravchenko is not coming back. In a different series we made about a different case, and neither is anyone harmed by the network we have described in this one. Schnitzler did not give Fridolin and Albertine a plan. He gave them a bed, a confession, and a sentence about dreams that refuses to resolve into comfort. We are going to do the same thing, not because we think the question does not matter, because we think it matters too much to answer for you. What we can do is make sure the names are said, not the names of the institutions, not the names of the men in the flight logs, or the men in the tomb, or the men beneath the owl. Those names are already public. They do not need our help to be remembered. The names that need saying are the ones that get lost underneath all of it, underneath the documents and the redactions, and the settlements and the hearings, and the years of nobody quite being held accountable for anything. Virginia Giuffre, who gave the world a name where the system tried to leave only an absence. The 30-plus victims documented by federal investigators in 2006, most of whom remain unnamed in the public record by their own choice or by the court's protection. Every person who appears somewhere in those 3.5 million pages, not as a guest on a flight log, but as evidence of something that was done to them. And Alexander Kravchenko belongs here too, in a different series for a different case, executed by a different state for a crime he did not commit. Because the pattern this series has traced is not limited to one country, or one decade, or one network of wealthy men in a forest, or an island, or a windowless room. The pattern is always the same, a respectable surface, a second life running underneath it, a room where the rules are different, a system that protects the people inside the room more thoroughly than it protects the people the room was built to use. And almost always, somewhere in the gap between the surface and the room, a person who pays the price that the powerful do not have to pay. We do not know all of their names. We know some of them. We have said the ones we know. There is one more thing Schnitzler's ending asks of us, and it is the thing we want to leave you with. He does not end the story with Fridolin and Albertine deciding to expose the gathering. He does not end it with them calling the authorities, or hiring an investigator, or dedicating the rest of their lives to making sure nobody else walks blindly into that villa. He ends it with them simply choosing to keep living, inside a marriage, inside a city, inside a world they now understand more completely than they did 3 days earlier. This is not a failure of the story. It is the most honest thing Schnitzler could have written, because it is what almost everyone actually does with knowledge like this. We carry it. We go back to our lives. We do not become activists or investigators or whistleblowers, most of us, because that is an enormous amount to ask of an ordinary person who simply wanted to understand something that had been hidden from them. What we can do, what is actually within reach, is refuse to forget that the room exists. Everyone knows. That has been the title of this series since the beginning, and we have spent 5 parts trying to earn the right to say it plainly. Everyone in Schnitzler's Vienna knew, in the way that respectable people have always known, that the surface of their lives was a performance, and that something else ran underneath it. Everyone who boarded a flight on that Boeing 727 knew whose plane they were on. Everyone who has ever discussed running for president, or sitting on a Supreme Court, or shaping monetary policy for a major economy, knows roughly which rooms those decisions actually get made in, and which rooms are simply where the decisions get announced. Everyone, on some level, knows that this is how the world actually works, not in the cartoonish, conspiratorial way that turns documented fact into something easy to dismiss, but in the quiet, structural way that Schnitzler diagnosed a century ago, and that the court records have been confirming in painstaking bureaucratic detail ever since. Everyone knows. Nobody says. Not because they are afraid, exactly, though some of them are. Not because they are complicit, exactly, though some of them are that too. But because saying it requires acknowledging something most people have arranged their entire lives to avoid acknowledging. That the fairness they were promised, the rules they were taught, applied to everyone equally. The idea that the doctor and the senator and the financier answer to the same law as everyone else. That arrangement has a second life running underneath it. And once you say that out loud, you cannot easily go back to not having said it. Schnitzler knew this in 1926. He wrote it into a story about a masked ball, and a password, and a gate, and a room, because that was the only way he could find to say it that his own censors would allow to be published. We did not have that problem, so we said it directly. The gate is still there. The forest is still there. The island is still there, even with new owners. The tomb is still there. The room, in some form, is always still there. You know that now. What you do with the knowledge is not something we can script for you. It never was. Everyone knows. Now you do too.